Oh, hi. So, if you're like me and you happen to offer both H2 biology and econs, you've probably wondered how many topics you have to study in order to stay afloat for the upcoming block tests. Well, good for you, because I just counted 35. So, if you do the math, there are 30 days in June, right? And if I study one topic a day, that still means that I'm 5 topics short of my block test syllabus. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that we shouldn't study for blocks. Now, being the very good student that I am, I'm going to make a very diligent decision and spend the last week of my June holidays intensely studying my ass. So, when we start a drawing, there's usually always something that motivates me. And today it just happened to be me not being able to do vectors after trying for about 4 or 5 hours. Yeah. So I found this picture online of this little, town square kind of thing. And I just thought that, you know what, this is kind of a nice scene to draw. So I drew it. Yeah. So you can see me drawing the trees in here. This is actually the first time I'm drawing these trees. But then I realized that they were a bit too close together, and I tried to work something with it, but it just didn't really work, which is why I kind of erased it and then started over. Yeah, I think when we do foundations like these, it's important that all the spacing is somewhat about right, because any mistake from here is gonna compound, later on when I continue doing the pen work. And if something is really wrong by then, it's gonna be very, very, very hard to change. It does get a bit frustrating sometimes because you're trying to get the perfect angle, and sometimes the dimensions don't exactly match up to the reference that you're drawing from. And for me, for this picture, some of the angles and stuff were a little bit off, but I just kind of lived with it. And this is kind of a leisure piece, so I was also a bit concerned that I didn't want to make this too stressful for myself, and I just kind of wanted to have a bit of fun. And I just really wanted to get in touch with this experience of drawing again after having spent so long on the holidays just studying and studying. So this is when I drew the trees the second time. They were a little bit wider apart this time, and I kind of didn't want the tree on the right to block the cathedral frontage in the background, and that's why I kind of moved everything around. And then here is when I'm adding in all the small details, the little huts, and just some of the decor on the wall, and just making sure that I got everything planned out before I start pen work. So because I get impatient, I sometimes like just starting with the pen first, before I actually finish sketching every little detail in drawing. As you can see right here, I didn't fill in the tree before I started drawing the tentage because I just got a bit too eager and kind of wanted the satisfaction of getting some pen ink on the paper. And so after I drew a tentage, I had to go back, sketch out the tree, and then start inking the tree. And trees are always a very interesting part of drawings like these to work on because every tree is kind of shaped differently. And I guess over time I've gotten to appreciate how they look the same but also not really the same in different works and different landscapes and countries. Oh, and these lamps were such a pain to draw. They were so small, which is why the video is so zoomed in, because I think if I didn't zoom it in, you guys probably wouldn't be able to see it. But because the picture is symmetrical, I had a really hard time making sure that both were actually the same size on both sides and that their position relative to everything else in the middle of the town square was correct. And it sped up I think 15 times the normal speed. But if you slow this down, I think that one lamp took at least 45 minutes. Not less so because it's difficult to draw, but just more so because I'm procrastinating and I just didn't want to draw anything because if I did draw something and it turned out to be very wrong, then I'd be in deep trouble. But in the end, it still worked and I think the lamp turned out fine. And so next, I just moved on to the big trees in the center of the town square. So if you see the arrows at the top, those are the ones that I drew in before I started applying any pen ink. And that's kind of to remind myself where the light is coming from and where the supposed wind is blowing, because the trees are actually shaped in a certain way and that kind of shows you over time which direction the wind tends to blow and where is the direction of force in the landscape. And for this tree, it was swinging the wind a lot towards the left, and I kind of wanted to depict that in the work. Yeah, this sense of directionality. You can see me filling in the leaves, and it does look very boring and difficult maybe, but I think it's actually quite a therapeutic process of figuring out where each individual leaf or block of leaves go on the tree and making sure everything looks coherent together. It takes very long. I think this tree itself took about 1.5, maybe 2 hours to do, but I think these are usually the most unexpected and fun parts of a work like this because I really don't know how the tree is going to look like. Even after drawing that many trees and shrubs and bushes, I have a bit of apprehension about, is it going to look like a tree? Is it going to look like something else entirely? And you just won't know until, I guess for this work, they kind of turned out alright. But I think for me, it's always kind of a reminder that just go with the flow and I'll figure things out as I draw them out. And that kind of applies to life in general too, just figuring it out as it comes, cross the bridge when you get there. So this is kind of interesting because I had drawn this earlier and then I had shaded in this entire black part at the bottom. Now you can't see it, my hand's covering. Yeah, so basically I shaded in this entire black part of leaves at the bottom. But I realized that it made the tree kind of stand in the wrong angle. And so that's why I took this white pen and took some time to fill in the whites at the bottom there. It looks a bit off color now if you're seeing it in the corner of the drawing as I move on with the big trees, but I think later, as the white kind of dries, it looks a bit better and the tree looks like it's in the correct angle. If not, it kind of looks like it's leaning towards the back a bit, which is a bit sad. Yeah, and then here I moved on because I got a bit bored of drawing the trees, so I moved on to the little tentagers at the bottom. I think these are kind of street vendors in the actual reference, but I didn't really know what they were for. So I just did a bit of like greebling, filling in details, and a lot of shadows because they were actually pretty dark in the reference. And I think it's nice to change up the scale a bit, do a bit of big trees, do a bit of these small details. It's a good variation for myself also. It makes the drawing fun and interesting, and it also keeps me drawing for a longer period of time. So here we move on to the second tree, and this is just drawing the bark. It's kind of boring. And I set out doing this one with the intention that I'm gonna make it as true to reference as I can, which meant that it was gonna look pretty different from the first one. So as you can see, I'm trying to block out where I want the leaves to be. This one's gonna be a bit more fat and chunky and more full of leaves than, frankly speaking, the left one, which is like kind of balding. Yeah. So yeah, this one, I was a bit concerned about where the leaves are gonna go, and when you draw trees like this, it's always a bit worrying because you're a bit afraid whether they're gonna look like clouds because there are that many leaves to think about. But I just did it bit by bit and kind of often stepped back to take a look at the entire thing and just make sure that it still looked correct and it still looked naturally possible. And that's also why these trees take so long to draw. As you can see, I'm also thinking about where the light is coming from. You can see the arrows behind telling me that, oh, the light is coming from the back and a bit from the right side shining towards the left as well. And that's the that's the shading that I need to constantly think about when I'm planning out where I want the new blocks of leaves to be. I think this bit is always really cool because when I shade in all the big, darker areas, it kind of instantly gives this tree a very three-dimensional look. Yeah, and it kind of jumps out from the paper a little bit, and you can tell which leaves are on the front layer and which leaves are behind that, and which leaves are behind the branches. And I think that is the point where I just thought, yeah, this is starting to look correct and I'm going in the right direction. So again, I'm using the white pen to kind of clean up a bit of the spots, and I'm constantly stepping back and squinting a bit and just making sure that it looks correct and none of the leaves look out of place. And zooming out, I think it turned out pretty nice. These two trees look very different, and I think that was kind of the look that I was going for, the contrast. So I think in that respect, it was a job well done. And so, heaving a big sigh of relief, I move on to drawing some of the smaller tendagers and other details that I missed out before. And now we move on to the most daunting part yet. This balcony that I decided to start with as, my first point of drawing all the buildings that I had to get to. So this was hard for me because even though the balcony was very dark, and it was supposed to be dark because there weren't a lot of lighting inside these very traditional and maybe kind of folk buildings, yeah. But at the same time, I could tell that there was also a lot of detail going on with the shrubbery and the fixtures inside the walls and also the railings, which were actually very, very fine. So I kind of tried to do my best to do justice to all these details, and I also kind of extrapolated a few of my own because some of the details really weren't visible in the reference. And I think this part is one of the more interesting parts of drawing. As you can see, I just used the white pen to sketch in a few more details. I get to imagine what the scene is like and think about what the other items and what textures belong in this kind of scene. And I think for the most part of this balcony, especially for the space that's more in the background, I was really doing a lot of it on my own and trying to see, if there were enough plants in there, or maybe it was being too distracting from the tree that was in front of it. I think the whole idea is about balance. I did want to include a lot of detail to make the balcony look interesting, but at the same time, I didn't want it to kind of eat up the tree that was in front of it to the point where the leaves and the branches, which were very thin, kind of looked invisible. So you can see me going back and forth with the white marker a lot, trying to give more weight to the branches and more visibility to the tree that is supposed to be in front of the balcony. And finishing up, I just did some touch-ups, added some colors, adjusted some blacks and whites, and then I moved on to the wall, which was actually pretty simple. It's just a bunch of shading. I think this looks a bit out of place now, but after I fill in some of the shades for the floor below and the buildings around it, it'll look more in place. So here I was doing some sketching and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to change from the reference in the ground floor. And I remember at this point I was actually looking around on Google for different angles of the exact same picture because I was trying to figure out what was going on in the ground floor because the reference wasn't very clear. And I actually faced these problems a lot. It's not just for this picture, but a lot of the times the reference doesn't really tell you what you want to know. And in those situations, it's either up to your imagination or you have to find another picture of the reference to try and get a better guess at what is going on and how you want to depict it. So at this point, we were just filling in a bit of the details on the ground floor and I was honestly feeling a bit tired and also uninspired. So in these situations, I would just take a break from drawing in the meantime and maybe focus more on my schoolwork, which is what I did. And that's why only half of this picture is complete so far. It's been really nice drawing during the holidays because, like I said, it really helps me to relax and take my mind off other stressful things that are going on. And for me, I think it's also good reassurance that I haven't completely lost it and lost touch with sketching and landscape and the art world in general. So I always need those moments of reassurance or two. And I think this whole experience in general has been quite nice and a good reminder of why I keep coming back to art and I draw even though I'm so busy with studies right now in this crucial period of time. So am I gonna finish this? Honestly speaking, I don't know because we're really quite close to blocks and the pressure is building. But I really do want to finish this work because it's looking quite promising and there are a few more artworks in the future that I've planned that I'm really looking forward to work on. In the meantime, I hope this video has been fun to watch. It was really interesting documenting and kind of vocalizing what I think in my head when I work on pieces like this. And until the next time I make something like this again, see you guys!